Professor Utomi, who is the convener of the Big Tent, and also a political economist, joins us from the United States. Prof, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, it's a great pleasure.
All right, Prof, it's been an interesting, let's say 78, 24, 48 hours between you and the APC. I read the statement by Felix Morka responding to some of the things you said, say you are unilaterally declaring a shadow government, using words I don't want to repeat on television. But let's get your initial reaction on some of the things you read from Felix Morka's statement.
I don't want to talk about Felix Morka. It will be disturbing of my sense of properness. Felix Morka is somebody I consider a friend. He used to spend a lot of time in my house. One of the sad things that politics has done in Nigeria is that it has allowed us to see the sides of people that we did not think was possible. If we could only focus on issues, it will save us where we've come to in Nigerian politics. But there is a tendency to go ad hominem in the culture of the APC. If you get on the internet, one of the things you read there that I was saying about being born in the North, school in the West and all of that, and knowing Nigeria. If you got on social media, you would think Nigerians are haters of each other because the venom with which they're insulting people. This is Nigeria I grew up in. At Nsukka, as an undergraduate, they called me Yoruba boy. People didn't realize that I was actually Igbo because 80% of my friends in Nsukka were Yoruba boys. And my politics have always been around Southwest type things. So to come to where we are in Nigeria today, for me, mentally, it's just not possible to reconcile it. Is this Nigeria that I know? Is this how people think of each other? It's not. So, it's clear that politicians have accentuated identity politics to be able to achieve personal goals. They don't seem to realize how much it has destroyed the country, torn its fabric, such that it makes achieving goals very, very difficult. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. But I don't know what their goals are. So I don't want to speak to Felix Morka's comments in any personal way. Let's take on the issues that he's brought up. First of all, about
the shadow government.
Shadow government being, what did he say it was?
In a presidential democracy.
Yeah. Nothing can be more democratic than a group of citizens getting together to say, let's find a structured way of asking governments to be more accountable. What could possibly be more democratic than that? I like to usually preface this conversation with what we've done to the African. There is the Afro Barometer annual surveys that have gone on since 1999 of how Nigerians, Africans generally, but in every country specific, with all kinds of details. I mean, I want every Nigerian who really wants to understand what has happened to our continent to go and study the Afro Barometer readings. It says that Africans still love democracy, cling on to it, but they are given up, more or less. They're tired because their democracies are not working. Now, any really serious Democrat has to be concerned to read this data, longitudinal, showing that people are fed up with what we call democracy. So trying to make democracy find renewal, find revival, should be something that any true Democrat would embrace. My expectation is that something like this will be, hailed by the APC, especially if you go back to the roots of the APC. I mean, I don't want people to forget history. But how did the APC start? Felix Morka used to come and run around with me in the early days, stay in the back of my car and tell me things. That's one of the things I'm doing now. Felix Morka used to be the one urging me that I should be doing them. So it's sad. But in those early days, when the PDP was talking about it will be in power for, I don't know, 60 years or some of us began to get worried. That's where this whole thing started. The leadership newspaper, I think it was 2012, then had as his annual lecture political parties and invited me to give the keynote. It was in Ladi Kwali Hall at the Sheraton in Abuja. That day, almost all of those who formed the APC were sitting on the high table, from the man who's in the villa now, Buhari, everybody. They were all lined up there. And I took time to go through what a political party was and why it is valuable to the democratic process. As I said in another program that I appeared on not so long ago, I went back to the original 1911 book, actually, on political parties, and then brought it to now. The ideas, the values, and the vision of society that the party captures essentially is what directs society's path. If you are trying to achieve a certain goal and people are defecting the way you've reported now, the question is, how are we going to have a public conversation with people who, we really don't know exactly what they believe in? So that is the first problem. Political parties are not political parties in our country. Now, because political parties are not political parties, the only thing that matters is personal ambition. And one of the saddest parts of what has happened is that they've pushed thinking out of the door. Anybody who thinks is an enemy, and they must use personal insults. Somebody who came presenting the party on another program I appeared on no more than 2 hours ago said that, I was an unstable person or some silly thing like that. And that, in fact, in my home state, the people in the current government were trying to defect, or I don't know if they've defected or not, that they know that Labour won the election. This was an APC person saying they know Labour won the election, governorship, everything. So that is because they know they didn't win the election. That's why they're trying to come to APC. So I said to the interviewer, look, I don't have to talk anymore. This man is making my case while abusing me. The point is that our democracy doesn't have meaning. The purpose of serving the people has been lost. It's about these individual games for power. And that's what the whole idea of citizens getting together to establish rational public conversation, which is what the idea of this so-called shadow government is.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about how it intends to operate in that sense. Maybe you can just help us, because I'm sure that perhaps why Felix Moka is saying what he says, for instance, in parliamentary system, that is as clear as crystal. In a presidential system, is it just having a strong opposition, viable opposition? How does it work?
It depends on what presidential system. One of the reasons we have a problem in Nigeria is the person who is president of Nigeria does not appear in parliament to be quizzed. The most important thing about parliament is question time. In South Africa, which is a presidential system, the president goes there, and Malema will take on whether it is Zuma or Cyril Ramaphosa, and the people will know what is going on. Questions can be asked every day of this person. It does not exist in our system. So how do you then make sure that the people are on top of how government is being run? Well, if you can bring together a group of people who believe in similar things and can organize themselves well enough to be able to ferret out information, first on what government is doing, second on options to what government is doing, and then make those bear to the people, you would have added huge value to democracy. But their panic is that they don't want conversation at all. When I talked about fascism, I didn't start saying that today. Look, you go back and read Jacques Ellul on propaganda, and you see how propaganda systematically leads to fascism. And that's why I keep referring to Goebbels and how Hitler emerged. I mean, the great fascists of this world were populists who cared for the people. But once you hear your voice long enough and no other voice, after a while, people who are near you say, you are God. And you say, oh, really? In fact, are more than God. Who is God self? And that's what a proper democracy helps you prevent from happening. And so the way we will operate as a shadow team is to meet at an interval like 2 weeks. Each shadow team member who has watch on some aspect of governing will present the state of the nation in that area, the latest policies from government, how it is working, what has not gone right, what better options there are, and we will debate it, discuss it, and put out a public statement about that situation. That is what this is about. Any rational, normal person who thinks this is undemocratic should please come forward and tell me how that can be. The Nigerian Constitution, as terrible as we have called it, guarantees this conduct. It doesn't say there's a shadow cabinet. It doesn't say there's no shadow government. Shadow cabinet is just nomenclature of a group of citizens who have said, we want government, which is an agent of ours. And the first thing in agency function is accountability to those who make those agents. So we, the citizens, have asked these people who we ostensibly voted for to be our agents, and they have an obligation to come back to us and tell us, look, this is how they've used our powers to do this on our behalf. Because that is not happening in our system, we need to make it happen as citizens that are committed.
All right, Prof. I think now that there's clarity, maybe Moka, I will be looking out for, maybe I'll send him a message and say, now that it is clear, what's your response to Prof? I'll send him a message after this. Now, I'm sure he will be listening, or his people will be listening.
I had so much respect for Felix.
So
he came from a... Anyway, let's leave that.
Okay, so let's get to some of the issues, and I want to ask some direct questions, Prof. One of my first direct questions is, what is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu doing wrong? And where do you see that wrong action taking us to?
See, again, you come to an area that I don't want to personalize things. Let's take policy, specific policies, and look at how they have been implemented, how they have not worked. And I can speak to how that is not going the way. And in my statement, I dealt with a number of them. Look, let's take the issue of pain. The people are feeling pain. In our country, people are really dying, suffering. There's hunger in the land. The way government carries on, you will not believe that is the case. And I use examples. When the government bought a befitting presidential jet, we had a lovely 737 presidential jet, but we bought a more befitting one at a time when most of our citizens could not eke out a bare human type survival. In our history, you can go back to 1976. As a young youth corps back then, we gave General Obasanjo hell for small things. But look at the kinds of things that he did. When oil prices dropped a few notches, he said that we could not afford to live the way we were living, that we had to cut our coat according to our cloth, not according to our size. He came down to a Peugeot 404 as the official state car. We know of a president in this world who drives around himself in his Volkswagen Beetle in Latin America. What is wrong with going even in your SUV? Why spend the kind of money we've spent buying this beast, or whatever they call that monster that is now a new presidential car? Not talk of new jets. You can't be doing things like that and ask people to sacrifice. No, you lead by example. But it seems like the Nigerian political class thinks that it should be given everything to live luxuriantly at the expense of a dying people. That is not acceptable to me as a citizen. And I think that we must reverse those kinds of ways of thinking about public life.
Prof, we got here because of two policies. Removing subsidy from PMS, removing subsidy from FX in that sense, and now for Band A people, that subsidy is also gone in that sense. What could he have done differently? I mean, as a policy direction, because the argument they also have is to the effect that all the frontliners had made similar promises.
Yeah, which is one of the big lies about that. And I want to give a clear example. You see, petroleum subsidy was a source of big abuse. Now people go back to say, you see, you fought it under Jonathan. When the thing was fought under Jonathan, the point I personally made in 1911 or 12, when the demonstrations were taking place, is it is not about removing subsidy. It is the corruption that is called subsidy. Part of the reason they were doing it around that time is elections were approaching. They wanted the so-called marketing companies to take the advantage of this so-called subsidy thing to fund the PDP. You can play games whatever you like or not. It's the corruption that I've always criticized. Subsidy is 70% corruption. If you really are serious, okay, this government is unfolding all kinds of things in NNPC. Haven't I been shouting about this for forever? I, on this channel, said a couple of months ago that NNPC was the most opaque organization in the world. Now, if we just seriously went and said, first thing, let's deal with the scam in this so-called subsidy, we would have removed 60% of what we call subsidy. Then we say, okay, having removed that, we don't want subsidy. What is left? How can we sequence the implementation that it does not trigger the kind of inflation that it did trigger? Yes, it will cause some inflation, but how can we manage it? So sequencing is a very critical part. Look, I was very involved in policy when we went through the structural adjustment program, and we talked about the J curve and all those lags. This will now kick in. And all that turned out to be a significant lie. It didn't kick in because there were many aspects of the process. And this is the new book I'm writing now, Why Some Nations Are Still Poor. Now, one of the most important things to put into the equation of an adjustment program of that nature is how to create markets. You know, Clayton Christensen, with one of his former Nigerian students, Ojomo, and another of his students, wrote a book, The Prosperity Paradox. We have to focus on how do we create markets and how do we build entrepreneurs. It is those people who then fill in this pipeline. It is nothing automatic at all about, oh, you remove subsidy, you this, and then economy will be good. It's lie. You create entrepreneurship, generate production, and with the production, as the pain is being felt, jobs being created, the exports that are taking place, providing foreign exchange, and you have a more balanced thing, and you grow your way out of that challenge. But not to have a strategy that includes all of this. It's a waste of time.
All right, Prof. One of the counter-arguments they always have at the macroeconomic level, they say when you look at the macroeconomics dashboard, it looks better than the administration of Muhammadu Buhari. So they pick up things like increase in FX reserve. They talk about, of course, we've cleared this IMF, although I think the charges are still there, but they've talked about this IMF within default. They've also talked about the issue of using some of these funds for NEL fund. They also talk about record high revenue for subnationals through FAC, and a couple of other things they reel out as some of the gains in that sense of the removal of some of these subsidies. But it's going to take a bit of time, just like you said, for it to come to fruition. And so Nigerians should just calm down in that sense. Does that argument make sense to you?
And I am telling you that that's the same argument all of us made in 1986, and it didn't happen. Because the lag, so-called J curve, doesn't just, you know, turn. We found that it didn't turn. And this is why I'm writing this book now, to show that it doesn't turn. Because we've not created entrepreneurship. We've not created markets. We have not raised production. As far as I know, Nigeria is not producing even to deal with the situation with food insecurity. Because there is insecurity in the land, the farmers are not going to the farms. Even many farmers have forgotten how to farm because insecurity has kept them away already for 7, 8 years from farming, so they don't even know how to farm anymore. So a massive program that begins to re-teach farming, provides incentives, provides security for these people to now grow, and systematically says, okay, look, there's hunger in the land. There's certain things if we focus on, it will take 5 years, but there are food crops that grow in 3 months. So let's take these legumes and massively support people, military protection, bam, in 3 months, food plenty. While they are eating, you are dealing with the other kinds of produce that we need to deal with. But I don't see any of that. You are not going to get anywhere unless there's enough entrepreneurship, unless there's enough markets being created. And they should know. They should go and talk to Utomi and the Prosperity Paradox people.
All right, Prof. As we begin to wind down, I know I read part of your tweets where you talked about let's not end up like the Rwanda situation. Some may say, oh, that's extreme. But one of the things you were calling out for are the elites, who you say are complicit in pervading some of the things you're not comfortable with in terms of policy direction. Who are you really speaking to?
I'm speaking to all of those people who pay all these goons on social media to insult people. And I'm glad I saw Judu's writing on it. They are making people hate. They are making people bitter in our country. And we're not bitter people. You check my profile, 80% of my best friends come from another ethnic group. And for me to wake up one day and actually see that everything I say is viewed from the ethnic group that I so-called come from. In fact, it's interesting that many years ago, Femi Falana said to me, don't go and run in Delta. You are more of a Lagos person. You know, we must deal with this identity politics thing and destroy it. Run for Senate in Lagos. Many years ago, Femi Falana sent me to do that. Well, at the point, I was not even going to run for anything anymore until some people dragged me and pulled me and said all kinds of things that made me go to Delta. Let me make a Sherman declaration here. Because, you know, one of the things that people who don't think like to think is that everybody thinks like them. And because the thing that drives them is power, position, money, they think everybody else is driven by that. Let me state clearly here that I will not run for public office. I will not accept an appointment. I will not accept a contract by any government in Nigeria. My only concern, my commitment is the well-being of the next generation. I have literally lived my life, and thank God I've lived it decently without government money or stealing anybody's thing. And I want to take that away from people who talk nonsense about, oh, he's looking for a contract, he's looking for position. President Yaradua and the people who were sitting with him when he invited me to become a member of his cabinet are alive. Offered me a position, and I said to him, sorry, I am not looking for a position.
Okay.
I am a patriot. You can call me anytime you want, and I'll give you the benefit of my position. So I think that these people are destroying a country that fomenting hate to sustain power is not a good thing. And history will question them, their consciences will question them, and ultimately God will question them.
Prof, I wish I had more time to explore some of the things you've talked about, but we must thank you so much for making our time to join us on the program. And I'm sure the APC and the ruling government, they've heard you, they've listened to you. At least you are now very clear that in case anybody thinks you're doing this for an appointment of a position, it's far from it. All right, Professor Pat Utomi, Professor of Political Economics, and the convener of Big Tent, joining us from the United States. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure.